Hey, so I thought we should talk about something that no one's been talking about for a while now. That's climate change and the Paris Accord and India's goals with respect to the Paris Agreement and how we're working towards achieving that goal. So, according to the agreement in Paris, India aims to have zero net carbon emissions by the year 2050. Are we doing something about that? It turns out we are. So let's check it out. There's something known as New Vehicle Scrap Policy Act in 2020 implemented. Now, what it does is first of all, it's a multi-agenda initiative taken by the government. First of all, it bans the sales of all vehicles not conforming to the BS6 standard of fuel emissions, which is the most the least carbon emitting fuel around in the market today. Secondly, the rules laid out for the owners of 15 to 20-year-old cars in turn are allowed to turn their cars in to scrap yards for scrap metal. And in return, they get a certificate, which they can provide while purchasing a new car from a new car dealership, availing a discount because through the certificate which they have in hand. Now, the discount, who's bearing this discount? Is it the car dealership? Not really. This discount is borne by the government as part of its initiative. Thirdly, the scrap metal is then introduced in a raw material for the Indian steel industry. Now you would say, why is that? It turns out that India is actually a net importer of steel. In terms of exports over imports, we do import more than we export. But how is that possible? Because we have so many big steel tycoons, right? Well, there's a reason for that. While we are the world's second largest exporter of crude steel, it turns out that refined steel is not something that we produced over here. The way it works out is that India turns out producing crude steel and sending it abroad, while out in countries, in Western countries, that crude steel is made into refined steel and imported back to India. And this steel is used for things like aeroplanes, surgical instruments, etc. Now, what is the beauty of this? The beauty of this act is that, firstly, through one single act, it's accomplishing three things. Firstly, it's reducing emissions. Secondly, it's providing raw material to a major industry. Like I said, India is the second largest producer of crude steel in the world. Thirdly, the excess scrap that we get out of this is then exported. And that is what I call strategy. Other goals with regards to the Paris Agreement. By 2022, all government vehicles above the years of 15 will be scrapped in return for a certificate and in return for the scrap which will be provided to the steel industry, like I mentioned. By 2023, there is a mandatory fitness testing for all heavy commercial vehicles in India. So you can imagine that all the bad trucks that we see in our roads these days, all of that will be disappeared in the next 2 years. Next, this is just one step, but how else? How do we progress towards the zero emissions goal in 2050? Because that's a big goal. Well, beyond the BS6 fuel emissions, for which I'll leave a link in the description, by the way, you can check out all about what BS6 emissions are. The next step that we are moving towards is obviously electric vehicles. So what's happening with electric vehicles? There's a lot of talk these days about electric vehicles. And but the question is, we're reaching a little bit of a conundrum because manufacturers aren't sure if the buyers are going to buy the electric vehicles, and hence and since they're not sure if people are going to buy the electric vehicles, they're not sure if they should start manufacturing it. So the government has come up with something clever to help out this conundrum. There's something known as FAME, Faster Allocation and Manufacturing of Electric Vehicles, which was implemented in 2020, I believe. I'm not sure. I'll check on that and leave it in the description below. Now, this makes use of a clever marketing strategy called the product lifecycle, which I'm sure most of you know. So in this product cycle, the way it goes with any new technology, whether we talk about vaccinations that are coming, whether we talk about new iPads, whether the first time the iPhone was introduced in 2007, 2008, whenever, it always follows this process. The first part of the product life cycle is the very small percentage with only the innovators who buy it. For example, the electric car Tesla, the first few people who buy it are the people who have actually invested money in it. So they want to build up the confidence. So they are like Elon Musk would buy the Tesla as one of the first customers of Tesla. Then the second part, the people who buy it are the visionaries or the people who are like the bloggers of cars and enthusiasts. The enthusiasts of technical cars and vehicles, they are the ones who buy it. Then after that, there is a chasm. This is the place called a chasm, after which there's the major chunk of sale which happens for electric vehicles, where the pragmatists end up buying it, the people who end up will believing that electric cars are the right thing to do, and they will eventually get on board with it, following which the conservatives will go on buying it, which is like the major chunk of the population. And lastly, the skeptics will also join the bandwagon, and that's usually how it goes with anything new that's been introduced, whether it's vaccine or electric cars. Now, electric cars, back to the conundrum about these machine manufacturers, the electric car manufacturers having a doubt about whether the customers will buy it. So what the government has done is they have relied on this product life cycle by saying that start manufacturing. Go ahead and start manufacturing, and we will give you incentives for this first part of the product life cycle. And the way the government is doing that is by giving an incentive of 10,000, adding 10,000 crores of investment in electric vehicles that are buses, rickshaws, and taxis. This way, the manufacturers have an incentive to begin with while making to do all the infrastructure, like creating the electric pumps and setting up all the manufacturing plants. Then, after which, slowly the life cycle will continue, and the pragmatists and the conservatives and the product life cycle will follow its usual path as planned. So that's the vision that the government has right now with electric vehicles. Now, the question is this also enough to go to zero net emissions by 2050? Maybe, maybe not. So we have one more thing in mind. There's something called hydrogen, which is the most abundant element on the planet. And the government's next plan, or you can say plan B, to make sure that it achieves its goal in the Paris Agreement, so that India plays its part in the role, it keeps its end of the bargain, so to speak, in the Paris Agreement, and lives up to its goal of zero emissions by 2050 by maybe switching to hydrogen. And for that, what have we done so far? 30 years away, it's a long time away. The government has invested 1,000 crores into research of hydrogen fuels, and maybe making that a possibility in the years to come for us to reach 2050 with zero emissions. And that is actually what I wanted to talk about our long-term strategies and how India is moving or trying its best to move towards climate change goals that the world is facing. And we don't talk about it anymore because of all the crises that's going on. But sooner or later, Corona is going to end, and we'll have to face the fact that the world is warming up and we need to cut down on carbon emissions. I hope this was informative. Thanks.